The rain hammered the roof of the stalled Mercedes like it wanted her gone. Victoria Lang gripped the wheel with white knuckles at 2:14 a.m. on County Road 19. Her phone lit up with 14 urgent alerts. The chairman's voicemail played on speaker one more time, crisp and final. Effective immediately, you are removed from all duties. Pack your office and go. She had no idea the quiet mechanic who would pull over in the next few minutes was the disbarred former star corporate lawyer who secretly wrote every foundational patent and contract that still protected the $1.4 billion empire she had just lost. What was hiding inside the man the world had thrown away? Tell us in the comments, which country are you watching from right now? Victoria Lang had built Lang Aerospace from a single patent napkin in 2008 into a publicly traded titan. 11 years of 18-hour days, 3 magazine covers, and 1 carefully managed image. The woman who never needed help. Then the board staged its quiet coup in a walnut-paneled room downtown. Marcus Hale, fresh in his Brioni suit and $18,000 Patek, had delivered the resolution without once meeting her eyes. His Italian loafers made soft clicks on the marble as security escorted her to the elevator. She left with 1 suitcase and the faded 2008 patent napkin she still carried in her coat pocket like a guilty secret. The Mercedes gave 1 final mechanical cough and died completely. Victoria killed the hazards. Darkness swallowed the empty highway outside Maple Ridge, Montana. Only the rain remained, drumming relentlessly on metal and glass. She pressed her forehead to the cool steering wheel and let the smell of wet leather fill her lungs. Headlights appeared in the rearview. Most drivers would have kept going at this hour. This one didn't. A battered blue Ford pickup slowed and eased onto the muddy shoulder. The man who stepped out wore a faded Carhartt jacket, steel-toe boots, and the quiet posture of someone used to being underestimated. Rain slid off the bill of his cap as he stopped 10 feet away, giving her space. He carried a heavy flashlight like it weighed nothing at all. Car trouble. His voice cut low and even through the downpour. Victoria cracked the window an inch. Cold pine-scented air rushed in. Looks that way. He nodded once. Mind if I take a look? She studied him. No swagger. No phone already in hand to record the stranded woman in the $60,000 car. Just steady eyes that had already seen worse nights. She popped the hood. His name was Lucas Reed. Single dad. Local mechanic. Owner of a modest cedar-sided house 3 miles back toward the hills. That much she would learn soon enough. Right now, he simply lifted the hood, shielding the engine from the rain with his own body. He worked in silence for 4 minutes, pocket multi-tool flashing once under the flashlight beam. Then he straightened, wiped his hands on a rag that smelled of diesel and pine tar, and spoke without drama. Failed camshaft position sensor. $87 part. Nothing exotic. But I don't carry one in the truck. Victoria gave a hollow laugh that tasted like rain on her tongue. Story of my week. Before either could speak again, another set of lights cut through the mist. A small yellow school bus slowed and stopped behind the pickup. The passenger door hissed open. Dad! A small voice carried clearly over the rain. 9-year-old Ellie Reed leaned out, braided hair swinging. You fixing another broken thing? Lucas smiled for the first time. The expression changed his whole face. Trying to, kiddo. Ellie's eyes found Victoria through the cracked window. You look like you lost something important. The words landed harder than they should have. Lucas started to apologize, but Victoria shook her head. She's not wrong. Ellie disappeared into the bus for a moment, then reappeared holding a slightly crumpled paper crane folded from notebook paper. She ran through the drizzle without hesitation and pressed it into Victoria's hand. For when you feel lost, she said simply. Then she climbed back inside. Lucas rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. Sorry. She says exactly what she thinks. Don't be, Victoria answered, voice softer than it had been in years. It's been a long time since anyone told me the truth without sending an invoice first. The rain eased into a cold mist. Lucas glanced toward the dark hills. We've got a spare room. Warm food. No strings. You're welcome to wait there till morning. Victoria's first instinct was to refuse. Then her thumb brushed the paper crane and something inside her chest gave way like a rusted hinge. She said yes. The short drive to the cedar-sided house took 12 quiet minutes. Ellie chattered nonstop about potato batteries and how her dad once lit an entire string of Christmas lights with one. Lucas listened as though every word mattered more than oxygen. Victoria sat in the passenger seat, still clutching the crane, trying to remember the last time anyone had paid that kind of attention to her without calculating the return. The house smelled of wood smoke and tomato soup. Photographs lined the narrow hallway, Ellie missing front teeth, Lucas teaching her to cast a line on some unnamed river, and one faded snapshot that made Victoria pause. Lucas, years younger, wearing a suit that looked 10 years out of date, standing beside a much younger version of himself while holding a thick legal folder stamped with the Lang Aerospace logo. Lucas noticed her staring but said nothing. Dinner was grilled cheese and tomato soup at a worn oak table. The bread had caught slightly at the edges. Ellie asked what Victoria did for work. Victoria hesitated, then answered honestly. I used to build things. Now I'm not sure anymore. Ellie nodded as if that explained everything and slid a second paper crane across the table. This one was bright blue. Over the next 3 days, Victoria stepped into a rhythm that felt borrowed from someone else's life. She helped Lucas repair a sagging section of fence at dawn, the cold wire biting into her palms. She rode with him to the garage on the edge of Maple Ridge where he coaxed life back into tractors and old trucks for local ranchers. She listened while Ellie read aloud from a dog-eared library book about explorers who never gave up. Each night, when the house grew quiet, Victoria would pull the faded 2008 patent napkin from her coat pocket. She would unfold it slowly, trace the 2 signatures, then fold it again. Her own name, and one other no one had ever been able to trace. On the 4th morning, the first black Suburban rolled slowly down Main Street. Then another. Men in spotless overcoats began asking quiet questions at the diner. They carried tablets and spoke in low, urgent tones about leadership instability and shareholder revolt. Lucas noticed the way Victoria's shoulders tightened every time a new set of headlights passed the garage. He never asked. He simply handed her a spare wrench and let her work beside him in silence. That evening, 3 vehicles flooded the driveway with bright beams. Marcus Hale stepped out first. His Brioni suit looked absurd against the Montana mud. The $4,000 watch on his wrist caught the porch light like a warning. Victoria, we've been looking for you for 71 hours. Lucas stood on the porch steps, arms crossed, saying nothing. Marcus's eyes flicked to the mechanic, dismissed him in half a second, then returned to her. The emergency shareholder meeting is tomorrow morning in Bozeman. Live stream for 100 investors. They need to see you step down gracefully or the stock loses another $240 million by opening bell. Victoria said nothing. Marcus took one polished step closer, leather soles squeaking faintly. Come back. We can still contain this. Your name on the letterhead. We'll even give you a generous exit package. 18 million. You walk away rich. Lucas's voice cut through the night, calm and low. She said she's not interested. Marcus finally looked at the man in the faded Carhartt jacket. And who exactly are you? Lucas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a single folded document. 17 pages, yellowed at the edges, dated March 14, 2009. Victoria's breath caught in her throat. Marcus's expression changed the instant he recognized the seal at the bottom. That's impossible. Those originals were sealed in a Swiss vault. Lucas's smile was thin as a blade. I never trusted vaults. Inside the house, Ellie appeared at the top of the stairs holding her favorite stuffed owl, sensing the tension without understanding it. Victoria glanced up, voice soft. Go back to bed, sweetheart. I'll be right here. The little girl hesitated, then disappeared down the hallway. Marcus's voice rose, edged now with something close to panic. You have no standing here, whoever you are. This is a billion-dollar company. Lucas stepped off the porch. Gravel crunched under his steel-toe boots. Actually, I have all the standing. He held up the document so the porch light caught every word. My name is Lucas Reed, formerly known as Counsel of Record on every foundational patent and shareholder agreement that still governs your entire empire. The ones you thought were written by some ghost consultant in 2009. I wrote them. Then the Bar Association tried to destroy me when I wouldn't sign off on the first hostile takeover. I walked away, but I never voided the clauses. He tapped the page. Section 47B. Unilateral removal of the founder requires unanimous consent of the original architects. You only had 6 out of 7 votes. Mine was the missing one. Always has been. Silence swallowed the driveway except for the distant call of a night bird. Marcus's face drained of color. His Patek suddenly looked very heavy on his wrist. Victoria spoke for the first time in minutes, voice steady as the mountains behind her. Tell the board the meeting will proceed as scheduled, but I will be there, and so will Mr. Reed. The next morning, the Bozeman Conference Hall crackled with tension. 200 folding chairs scraped against polished concrete as executives in pressed suits filed in, clutching branded coffee cups that smelled of expensive Ethiopian roast. Victoria sat at the head table in a simple navy dress, spine straight, the folded 2009 document now resting inside a plain manila folder on her lap like a loaded round. Marcus paced the side aisle, Italian loafers clicking too loudly, his Brioni jacket unbuttoned for the first time anyone could remember. The wall clock read 8:47 a.m. when the side door opened. Lucas entered without fanfare. Same Carhartt jacket, same steel-toe boots that left faint clay prints on the marble. He carried nothing but a battered leather satchel that smelled of engine oil and old paper. Heads turned. A low murmur rippled through the room. Someone in the back row whispered, "That's the guy from the property dispute filings. They said he was finished." Marcus's laugh came out brittle. "Mr. Reed, still playing dress-up as the wronged original counsel? The board has seen the affidavits. You resigned in 2011. The bar revoked your license. You have no vote, no voice, and frankly, no standing in this room." He gestured at the projector screen where a glossy slide already displayed the company's latest valuation. $1.87 billion. We built this without you. The patents have been litigated, refiled, and fortified. You're yesterday's footnote. Lucas didn't sit. He simply walked to the podium, set the satchel down with a soft thud, and looked straight at the sea of skeptical faces. Yesterday's footnote just bought seat 18C on the red eye from Dulles so I could be here before the first motion. He unzipped the bag. The sound of the metal teeth seemed to echo. From inside he pulled a single object the room had never seen. A small brass key, tarnished, no larger than a dog tag, attached to a faded green lanyard. The same key that had been tucked inside the original 2009 document like a bookmark. He laid it on the podium where the overhead lights made it glint. Victoria's fingers tightened around her own copy of the folder. She remembered the night Lucas had first shown her that key, 2 weeks earlier in her kitchen at 2:14 a.m., while Ellie slept upstairs clutching her stuffed owl. He had said only, "This opens more than doors." Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his jaw flexed. "Security is on the way. You have 60 seconds. Lucas ignored him. He tapped the podium mic once. The feedback squealed, then settled. 17 years ago, I wrote the deadlock provision into every core agreement because I knew men like you would come. Section 47B was never about ego. It was insurance. One missing architect, one withheld signature, and the entire governance structure freezes. You've been operating under a cloud title for 14 months. Every acquisition since then, every stock issuance, every wire transfer over $2 million is technically voidable. A board member in the front row, a woman named Claire with razor-sharp cheekbones and a Hermes scarf, leaned forward. That's a legal fairy tale. Our counsel missed the codicil, Lucas cut in quietly. He slid a second sheet from the satchel, page 18, never filed, bearing the same yellowed edges. Page 17 was always a decoy. The real teeth sit on the reverse of the signature block. Microprinted. You need the key to read it under proper light. He held the brass key up again. The room leaned in despite itself. I have the only original, and I never sold it. Not when they offered me $800,000 in a Zurich backroom. Not when the bar investigator threatened my daughter's future. The word daughter landed like a stone in still water. Victoria's head snapped toward him. For the first time, the slow leak of his hidden life widened. She had known pieces, but not this. Lucas met her eyes for half a second, then looked away, the muscle in his cheek jumping. Marcus's face had gone from flush to ash. His Patek caught the light as he checked it again. 8:53 a.m. Two uniformed security guards appeared at the rear doors, batons resting on their belts. The murmur in the hall sharpened into something electric. Then the first real fracture appeared. A junior analyst near the back, a kid no older than 24 in an off-the-rack suit, stood up so fast his chair clattered. Wait, the 2009 filings. The metadata on the original PDFs never matched the timestamps. We thought it was a scanning error. But if he wrote them, the young man's voice cracked with the thrill of discovery. Sir, if he's telling the truth, our last 3 patent defenses in the Delaware court could be vacated. We're looking at $900 million in contingent liabilities. Marcus rounded on the analyst. Sit down, Tyler. You're an intern. Actually, he's a level 3 patent paralegal who caught the discrepancy last quarter and was told to bury it, Lucas said, voice calm as creek water. Invoice number 4471. I have that email chain too. The room fractured. Half the executives reached for their phones. The other half stared at Lucas as though he had just removed a mask. Victoria watched Marcus's polished armor crack in real time. His shoulders rounded. The Patek suddenly looked borrowed. But the escalation had only begun, because Lucas wasn't finished leaking the past. He reached into the satchel one more time and removed a small, worn photograph. The image showed a much younger Lucas in an army dress uniform, silver wings on his chest, standing beside a helicopter on a windswept pad in Kandahar. Date stamp in the corner, March 14, 2009, the same day the document was signed. The brass key hung around his neck in the photo, resting against dog tags. He didn't explain it. He simply set the photo beside the key on the podium and let the room draw its own conclusions. A decorated Night Stalker pilot who had traded rotor blades for contract law, then walked away from both when the system tried to bury him. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus's voice, when it returned, was hoarse. This meeting is adjourned until we can verify. No, Victoria said, rising. Her voice carried to the back row. The meeting proceeds, and Mr. Reed will present the full chain of title. Every clause, every withheld signature. Right now. Lucas nodded once. He turned to the projector, plugged in a thumb drive the size of a matchbook, and the first slide appeared. It was not a valuation chart. It was a scanned image of the original 7 architect signatures, 6 in black ink, 1 conspicuously absent. His own name sat in the empty box like a guillotine blade. As the first line of legalese filled the screen, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID read, General Counsel Zurich. He answered it with shaking fingers. Whatever he heard on the other end drained the last color from his face. He lowered the phone slowly. At that exact moment, the side door opened again. A small figure slipped in, unnoticed by most. Ellie, still in dinosaur pajamas, clutching her stuffed owl like a shield. She had followed her mother's car on her bicycle for miles of dark county road because the house had felt too empty after the porch confrontation. The little girl scanned the crowded room, spotted Lucas at the podium, and her face lit with recognition. She started toward him, owl dangling by one wing. Security moved to intercept. Lucas's entire posture changed. The quiet restraint that had defined him since the driveway cracked open. His voice dropped into a register the entire hall felt in their sternums. Touch her and the next document I file won't be in this room. It will be in federal court with a RICO attachment. The guards froze. Ellie reached the podium, tugged on Lucas's jacket, and held up the owl. "Mr. Lucas, he's scared too," she whispered loud enough for the front 3 rows to hear. "The stuffed animals left button I was missing. Lost years ago in the same move that had brought them to Montana." Lucas knelt, took the owl gently, and for the first time since the humiliation on the porch, the audience saw something beneath the Carhartt armor. A father who had once flown 287 combat missions and still knew how to make a child feel safe. He tucked the brass key into the owl's worn pocket, the same way he had done when Ellie was 3 and nightmares came every night. Then he stood, handed the owl back, and looked directly at Marcus across 200 witnesses. Section 47B is now formally invoked. You have until noon to produce the unanimous consent you never had, or every deal you've signed since 2010 becomes mine to unwind. Marcus stared at the child, at the key now riding inside the stuffed owl, at the photograph of the younger Lucas wearing the same key like a medal. The polished CEO swallowed once, the sound audible through the still open microphone. For the first time, real fear lived in his eyes. Not for the money, for the slow realization that the man he had dismissed as scrap metal had been holding the entire foundation in his pocket for 17 years. And the grind had only just begun. Outside the conference hall windows, dark clouds gathered over the Bridger Mountains. The temperature had dropped 6 degrees since dawn. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled low and patient, like an engine turning over after a long sleep. The next 48 hours became a ledger of quiet precision. Lucas didn't raise his voice again. He simply moved. At 8:17 a.m. the following morning, a process server in a rain poncho handed Marcus a thick manila envelope outside the Copper Mountain Lodge. Inside were affidavits from 7 former board members, each swearing they had never been told about the 47B clause. The signatures were dated between 2011 and 2023, each notarized with timestamps that matched scanned board meeting minutes Lucas had kept in a waterproof Pelican case since the day he walked away. Marcus read them in the back of his rented Escalade while the driver waited at the curb. The leather seat creaked under him. His Patek Philippe read 841. He felt the second hand like a small hammer against his wrist. By 10:05 a.m., the first wire transfer cleared. $4.2 million, original seed money Lucas had quietly funneled through 3 shell companies in 2008, returned to an account labeled L.J. Harlan Revocable Trust. The bank officer in Bozeman who authorized it later told his wife the instructions had come on paper stationery that smelled faintly of jet fuel and engine grease. The grind tightened. At 11:40 a.m., Marcus stood in the empty boardroom on the 3rd floor of the lodge, tie loosened, staring at a single line item on a projected spreadsheet. Undisclosed founder equity, 51%. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. His legal team had gone silent on the conference call. One of them finally cleared his throat and said the words Marcus already knew. "There's no unanimous consent on record. Never was." At precisely 11:59 a.m., Lucas walked back into the conference hall carrying nothing but a worn leather briefcase and the same Carhartt jacket. The room was fuller now. Word had spread. 217 people filled the seats. Investors, local ranchers who had sold their mineral rights to Marcus's firm, 3 state senators, and every single person who had watched Ellie's father be thrown off his own porch 6 days earlier. The stuffed owl sat on the table beside the gavel, its missing button eye staring out like a witness that refused to blink. Marcus was already at the podium. His Italian shoes, once mirror-bright, now carried a thin film of Montana dust. The Brioni suit looked slept in. When Lucas reached the front row, Marcus stepped aside without being asked. The movement was small, almost deferential. The microphone picked up the shuffle of expensive leather on hardwood. Lucas set the briefcase down, opened it, and removed a single folded document. The paper carried the faint scent of old hanger oil, the same smell that had clung to the key for 17 years. He didn't read from it. He simply held it up so the overhead lights caught the notary seal. 17 years ago, I signed over operational control to Mr. Vale in exchange for protection of the mineral rights beneath 312 acres of my family's land. The agreement was simple. My name stayed off every press release. My equity stayed buried in Section 47B. The only condition was unanimous board consent for any sale or transfer. Consent that was never obtained. He let the words settle. Then he looked straight at the people who had laughed on his porch. Which means every contract signed since March of 2010 is, under Montana Corporate Code, voidable at the discretion of the undisclosed principal. A woman in the third row, Sarah Klein, the rancher who had sold her water rights for pennies on the dollar, let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. It rippled outward. Marcus stepped forward. The microphone caught the dry click of his swallow. "Mr. Harlan," he said, voice stripped of every polished layer. "Lucas." The hall went tombstill. "I thought you were finished." I told myself a man who lived in a trailer and fixed other people's furnaces couldn't possibly be the same man who designed the guidance system that kept half my early drones in the air during those first test flights over Nevada. I was wrong. He turned to face the audience. His hands trembled once, then steadied. I publicly humiliated a decorated combat pilot, a father, and the original founder of this company so I could keep the valuation clean for investors. I did it on his porch in front of his daughter, while she held the only thing that still connected her to her mother. There is no spreadsheet that balances that. Marcus looked back at Lucas. The fear in his eyes had changed shape. It had become recognition. "I'm sorry." Privately, and now, in front of every person I let watch you bleed. "I'm sorry again. The company was never mine to sell. The land was never mine to lease. I will sign whatever documents you need. Today." He reached into his own jacket, produced a pen, and placed it on the podium beside the owl. The room didn't erupt. It exhaled. Lucas studied Marcus for 3 full seconds. Then he reached down, picked up the stuffed owl, and turned it so the worn pocket faced the crowd. The brass key glinted under the lights, still tied to its faded green ribbon. He spoke quietly, but the microphone carried every syllable to the rafters. Section 47B is hereby exercised. All mineral leases executed after 2010 are terminated. All royalty payments will be recalculated and returned to the original surface rights owners at a rate of 110%. The company will be restructured under its original charter, and the name on the building will read Harlan Aerospace again by close of business Friday. He looked at Ellie, who had been sitting quietly beside Sarah Klein. The little girl smiled the small, secret smile only children who have watched their father become legend can manage. Outside, the thunder that had been rolling since dawn finally broke. Rain lashed the tall windows in sudden sheets. Inside, the sound mixed with the rustle of 200 people rising to their feet. Not in applause, in recognition. Later that evening, the Bridger Mountains wore a fresh coat of snow that smelled like ozone and pine. Lucas stood on the repaired porch of the old farmhouse, the one Marcus's security team had helped rebuild that afternoon under quiet orders. Ellie slept inside, the owl tucked beneath her chin, its pocket now empty. The brass key rested on the mantel beside a single photograph. Lucas in flight suit, 2007, the key hanging from his neck like a talisman. Marcus arrived at 9:12 p.m. No driver.
No entouraje.
Just the same dusty Italian shoes and a humility that looked newly broken in. He stopped at the bottom step. "I meant what I said today," he offered. Lucas nodded once. "I know." Marcus glanced at the key on the mantel through the window. 17 years. You kept every receipt. "Kept the truth," Lucas corrected. "Receipts were just how I proved it." A long silence stretched between them, filled by the hush of falling snow. Marcus reached into his coat and produced a small envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. His formal resignation, effective immediately, with a handwritten note at the bottom. "I was never the CEO. I was the caretaker who forgot whose house this was. It's yours again. All of it." He placed the envelope on the railing and turned to leave. Then he paused. "Your daughter. She's going to grow up knowing exactly who her father is. I envy her that." Lucas watched him walk back down the drive until the taillights disappeared around the bend. Only then did he pick up the envelope, fold it once, and slide it into the same pocket where the key had ridden for so long. Inside, Ellie stirred in her sleep. She murmured something about flying. Lucas smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't need an audience. He closed the door against the cold, the brass key catching the firelight one last time before he turned it over to the mantel's quiet keeping. 17 years of silence had bought something money could never measure. The chance to watch a room full of doubters realize the man they had thrown away was the only reason any of them still had a seat at the table. And in the end, the debt wasn't paid in humiliation. It was paid in restoration. That was the part no balance sheet would ever show. Some foundations are poured in concrete and steel. Others are poured in patience, in late nights spent protecting a child's future, in the slow decision to let the world believe you are smaller than you are, until the exact moment when the truth needs to stand up in a crowded room and speak. Lucas Harlan had done both. He had flown combat missions at 30,000 feet, and he had flown at ground level for a little girl who only wanted her father to come home. In the quiet afterglow of that long Montana winter, the two altitudes finally met. And for the first time in 17 years, the man who had once been dismissed as scrap metal stood at the center of his own sky, unhidden, and the horizon looked exactly the way it was always meant to look. Wide open.